मुझे जो 11 लैब्स में एंटनी है उसकी आवाज पे वॉइस दो. They ruled as living gods, yet every night they trembled at something no army could fight. The pharaohs built pyramids to touch the heavens, but not out of pride, out of fear. A fear so powerful they tried to bury it beneath stone, gold, and silence. They ruled as gods on earth. Their names were carved in stone, their tombs built taller than mountains, their faces turned toward eternity. But behind the gold and the glory, the pharaohs were afraid. Afraid of something no army could fight, no wall could stop, and no priest could truly protect them from. A fear that haunted them every night as they stared at the stars and wondered what waits for a god after death. This is what the pharaohs feared most.
In ancient Egypt, pharaohs were seen as divine beings, half man, half god. Their word was law. They could command thousands of workers to move mountains of stone, and entire cities would rise from the desert at their command. They built pyramids not just as monuments of power, but as promises to the afterlife, grand stairways to eternity. But deep inside, every pharaoh knew the same truth that every mortal feels. No matter how powerful you are, death always comes. The Egyptians didn't see death as the end. They believed it was just the beginning of a journey. But that journey was dangerous, and not everyone reached the other side.
But their fear didn't end there. The pharaohs also feared something else, something every ruler dreads: being forgotten. To the Egyptians, immortality wasn't just about living forever in another world. It was about being remembered in this one. If your name was spoken, if your story lived on, your soul stayed alive. But if your name was erased, your spirit would fade into nothingness. That's why they carved their names deep into stone. That's why they built monuments that could survive for thousands of years. They weren't only showing power, they were fighting oblivion. And that fear wasn't just spiritual, it was political. Pharaohs ordered the destruction of their rival statues, their inscriptions, their names. To erase a name was to kill a soul twice, once in life and once in eternity. So they built their tombs hidden deep beneath the desert, guarded by curses and traps, desperate to protect their memory and their afterlife.
But their fear didn't end there. The pharaohs also feared something else, something every ruler dreads: being forgotten. To the Egyptians, immortality wasn't just about living forever in another world. It was about being remembered in this one. If your name was spoken, if your story lived on, your soul stayed alive. But if your name was erased, your spirit would fade into nothingness. That's why they carved their names deep into stone. That's why they built monuments that could survive for thousands of years. They weren't only showing power, they were fighting oblivion. And that fear wasn't just spiritual, it was political. Pharaohs ordered the destruction of their rival statues, their inscriptions, their names. To erase a name was to kill a soul twice, once in life and once in eternity. So, they built their tombs hidden deep beneath the desert, guarded by curses and traps, desperate to protect their memory and their afterlife. Inside the Valley of the Kings, tombs were sealed with warnings, carved in stone. Death shall come on swift wings to him who disturbs this tomb. To us, it sounds like superstition, but to them, it was insurance. The pharaohs feared the thieves who would break into their tombs and steal the treasures they believed were needed for their eternal life. If the body was destroyed, if the mummy was damaged, the soul could never rise again. That's why preserving the body was sacred. That's why they wrapped themselves in linen and surrounded their remains with protective symbols and amulets. The tombs were not graves, they were spiritual machines, built to keep a pharaoh's soul intact for eternity.
Centuries later, explorers opened those same tombs, and what they found inside was not just gold, but a lingering fear. In 1922, when Howard Carter uncovered the tomb of Tutankhamun, stories spread fast. Soon after the discovery, several members of the expedition died mysteriously from fevers, infections, and strange accidents. The newspapers called it the Pharaoh's Curse. Scientists explained it as coincidence, or perhaps toxic mold sealed inside for centuries. But in Egypt, people whispered something else. They said the Pharaoh's spirit had finally awakened and he was angry. Even today, locals hesitate to disturb ancient tombs. They believe some doors were never meant to be opened. Was it superstition, or was it fear, the same fear that the pharaohs themselves carried to their graves?
There's a darker truth hidden in all of this. The pharaohs didn't fear death itself. They feared what would happen if they failed to live forever. To them, the afterlife wasn't paradise, it was a test. If they failed, their soul would be torn apart, erased from all existence. If they succeeded, they would rule among the stars forever. That's why they devoted their entire lives to building tombs, temples, and rituals. Every word, every carving, every burial act was meant to cheat death. But time had other plans. No matter how deep they buried themselves, tombs were broken into, bodies were stolen, treasures looted, mummies burned for medicine or sold as curiosities. The pharaoh's greatest fear, being forgotten, came true. Their kingdoms vanished into sand. Their names were erased by the same wind that once carried their prayers. Yet, even now, thousands of years later, we still speak their names. Ramses, Tutankhamun, Akhenaten, Nefertiti. They live on, not as gods, but as mysteries. And perhaps that's the irony. In trying to escape death, they achieve something different. Immortality through our curiosity. We study them, fear them, and sometimes even dream about them. We open their tombs, read their secrets, and stare into their mummified faces and wonder, what did they really see when they crossed into the next world?
So what did the pharaohs fear most? It wasn't war. It wasn't betrayal. It wasn't even death itself. They feared judgment. They feared being forgotten. They feared discovering that all their power meant nothing beyond the grave. And maybe, in that way, we are not so different from them. Every human being, whether a king or a farmer, carries that same quiet question. When I'm gone, will I be remembered? Will my name fade like dust or echo forever beneath the sands of time? History doesn't always whisper through books. Sometimes it speaks through silence, through tombs, curses, and fears carved into stone.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell for more. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. See you in the next one. Bye for now.